Hello legends! In this video, I'm going to go over my top 10 data handling tips for building out n8n workflows. I've got this playground over here that has a bunch of dummy data, different configurations, different pathways, and I want to use this to showcase 10 different data handling techniques that I actually use in my production ready workflow. So every time I touch n8n and I build out a workflow, I'm using a collection of these actually. And this is not something that I want to show you that I think is interesting, that you might like. This is actually stuff that I use. So hopefully there's a couple of things here that just simplify things for you, clarify things for you, and just help you build better workflows and just make it easier in general. So the first thing I want to look at is the expressions. And I'm going to show you the top 3 that I actually use very regularly. So tip number 1 is I'm just going to go into a random edit fields node to showcase this. But in the place where you put in your value for a specific variable, you can click that little expressions button. Sorry, in case that was too fast. You have fixed and you have expression. Once you click expression, you can double squiggly brackets. Sorry, and then you open up a bunch of these different functions or different expressions, and then on the right hand side, the explanation of what that specific function does. If you use your arrow keys, you go down, and then you can actually keep seeing the definitions over here. So you've got a bunch of different things over here. You have metadata that you can actually access. So the stuff that I use, there's 3 that I use from here all the time, and I use these 3 to actually log events of my workflow onto a separate database. The first one is this now. So this now actually just defaults to the current time and date in the time zone of your workflow. And you can change the workflow time zone by going into settings. And mine is defaulted to Europe, Berlin, but I can change this to Melbourne, Australia. And if I hit save and come back into here, then the actual output is going to be in Melbourne, Australia. Now, the cool thing is that you can take this expression, then go into ChatGPT, and I can say, in n8n, I have this expression, which is this, which outputs, and let me just copy this in that specific format. Can you modify, this so it outputs the date in format day, month, year. Now you can get ChatGPT to just modify that specific output into anything that you want. So let's paste it into here. And now we have 30th of the 11th, 2025. I can have ChatGPT change this to be the date and then the time. I can make it actually change the time zone as well. It can adjust everything there if I don't want to actually edit the workflow time zone. So this is really cool. And this is a very basic example, but in one of the nodes later on, in this node over here, this AI agent step, we're working with some like complicated data. I've made up some hooked data that's a little bit tricky to work with. So over here, we also use the expression, and then we have to modify it with ChatGPT. It's a bit more complex, and I think that'll be interesting for us to see. So the next one that I use here, if I go double squigglies and just scroll down, is this execution's metadata. So I go execution ID, and we see nothing right now because we're just demoing this workflow. But every time this workflow runs, it actually saves the execution. You go into the executions tab, and you see the ID associated with that specific run. So we have 38671, then we have 38670. So anytime that I'm logging events from my workflow onto a database, I will use the execution ID so I can see and say, oh, this specific run messed up, which execution was it? Then I can drill into the execution, bring the data into my editor, debug, fix things. And the final one that I use is the workflow name. So workflow, you can either go .id, and this is the API accessible ID reference, so if you want to make an n8n API call, or oftentimes I just use workflow.name. And this is just the name that you set for the workflow in this top section over here. So then I have sometimes I have multiple workflows which are overseeing just one human task. Multiple workflows are sending execution data into one table in a database. And sometimes I just want to see which workflow added this specific information. So these are the top 3 things that I use. There's a couple of other interesting ones here as well. Like if you're using AI agent nodes, you've probably already seen the from AI. And the from AI, this is very easy to use. I think, well, it's actually not so easy to use. You know what I actually do to actually build out these from AI functions is I just go to the n8n documentation and I go with chat with docs. This, by the way, is a massive unlock. If I a lot of the things that maybe 2 of the 3 of the things that I learned for this list that I'm showing you, I would come into this chat with docs in the n8n documentation, And I think this AI agent has access to not only the documents that we see here, but also the community discussions. And this is amazing at like helping you work with data as well. So sometimes if I want to do like a from AI function, I can just say, create me a from AI function that generates a name based on the input, whatever it is, like whatever your specific use case is. And then this is going to give you the explicit way to actually generate that. So, I mean, this is easy enough if you know how to use the from AI function and you kind of learn the nuances of how to set it up. But here we are, name, generate a name based on the input, and it's a string. Then you can just copy this expression and then go back into your workflow, and then you would paste it into your AI agent step. So that's also another hack, is just use the chat documentation AI from n8n. So that's yeah, that wasn't part of this list, but I actually love that tool. Use the set fields node to stabilize data across key workflow segments. This is massive. I actually learned this after building out heaps and heaps of workflows. So the typical path that I found for myself was you build a workflow, 10 nodes, whatever, and you put it into production and it's running against real data, like let's say customer data. As it runs and it's successful, you begin to like want to expand it and optimize it. And you start thinking like, oh, okay, now we have this database of customer support tickets. At the start of each interaction with this workflow, I now want to plug into the database and see, does this customer exist? So you'll actually come back to your workflow, you'll like bring the first node out, and you'll add a bunch of nodes into here, a database node, maybe a code node, an if node, and you have like a separate mini workflow that you're just chunking into different sections of your workflow. And yeah, one thing that I found was when that happens, it was very hard for me. Like, I would typically reference data from like nodes. I might rename the node. I might delete the node altogether because maybe it wasn't useful anymore. And that just caused problems down the line for each of my key sections of the workflow. So now I just install an edit fields node, and then I'll just use that whenever I need to make a key change to my workflow. I will just make the change before the edit fields node and map the new variables into here. So for example, in this node, I have a reference to the edit fields node. The dummy data that I have here is just like a grocery item list, and this specific code node, which we'll come back to later on, just checks if the edit fields taco, if one of the items from there is actually present in this grocery list. So I'll come back to the here later on. But let's see, we have a variable here, which is edit fields. Okay, so this specific variable references the edit fields node. This is a key section of my workflow where we see, does the food that we're speaking about, is it part of our shopping list? Now, if I was to like edit this edit fields node and just change something here, like add a code node into here, now it's very easy for me to change the functionality of the start of this workflow, map in this new code node, which just for argument's sake is mapping different food items, and I can now go into my edit fields node where I previously hard coded taco and aptly, which actually it should have been apple, and now I can just dynamically insert these variables into this edit fields node, and then I can kind of push this data across. Another thing that I do is actually when I'm building out workflows, like let's say this is a webhook, I will run the execution, so I get the data in the webhook, and then I just go node by node. I get my code node, I hit the run button, and then whatever happens in this code node, I can see if anything stuffs up, I just go node by node and I can see the issue. It's a very good way to like isolate things. So that was my second tip. Actually, I'm going to skip over 3 and go into 4 quickly. So over here in my switch node, I actually have my routing rule, which is taco. And if food 1 is taco, we take route taco. And if food 1 is apple, we take route apple. The unfortunate thing is I actually haven't built out the apple route for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this to also show apple. So if route 1 shows apple and route 2 shows apple, like what actually happens here? So this is tip number 4, I think it was, that n8n just takes the first live wire. So if I execute this, we're actually going to take the taco route, which is this first route over here. Even though both are apple, we just take the one, it's like the path of least resistance. So now when we get into here, we can access the food 1 and kind of like execute through here. The other thing that I want to show you, this is where it gets interesting as well. So let me just like combine, make it look a little bit neater here and here. So let's say we did this as well. So the first live wire also applies when you're building out workflows and you have like strings of information coming from different places. So actually, let's just do this. This is my helper here. So I'm going to take this route, and with this helper, I actually use the do nothing node. Do nothing node. It literally does nothing. It just passes through the information from before. The do nothing node is also unique because it actually just passes through the live wire of data that comes through it. So in this case, we actually have the code node coming in, and then we have the switch node coming in. So if I execute this, we actually have two items that were executed, but let's see what's accessible at the AI agent step. So from the principle that we're just looking at, which is the first live wire, technically the data from the new fields node is only accessible in my AI agent, and the data from the switch node will not be accessible in my AI agent. So if I have, let's just execute this and let's see what happens here. So no prompt specified. So I'm pretty sure this is just like an issue with the error output, but we have json.food1, and if I look at the merge node for run1, we actually don't have a food1 variable, but run2, we have the food run variable. So what this means is that for this over here, this is run1, and this is run2. In the AI agent step, I'm referencing the information from the switch node, which is causing it to error out. But if I reference the information from the new fields node, so let's just change this, let's backspace, and let's go to the run1, which is Apple. If I execute this, now it's actually going to work because the data set is only coming in from the first live wire, which is this top wire from the new fields node. But there is another tip here that we can use. We have first live wire. Access the data from any path using this first statement or this first edit. So if I did want to access the data of that switch node, which is, now it's getting confusing with the run2, so let's just backspace this, and this is coming in from that switch node as well. If I want to access this, actually, sorry, this is the wrong way to do it. If I want to go back to this switch node, let's just see this. Technically, this is undefined, and it's undefined, and you would see this so many times if you have like a lot of if nodes, switch nodes, a lot of different pathways in your workflow. You probably come across this and it says undefined, but you're looking and you're thinking like, no, actually, it's literally right there. Why can I not access it? So a little hack is to change this item with first, open bracket, close bracket, and now you have access to Apple. Literally, that works every single time. You can be any stage of the workflow. As long as that node is plugged in and it's actually running, it doesn't have to be information from the live wire. It can be from any place back in the workflow. So before if nodes, loop nodes, anything like that, you can actually still access this information. So actually this was also useful for loop nodes. Sometimes I used to think like, oh, I've actually got to bring in a separate pathway and then have a merge node over here and then merge the data together. But you don't. You can actually just use that little hack where it has changed the item to first with the open and close bracket, and then you can access it from any branch in the workflow. So that is a bunch of cool little tips over here. This might be a bit confusing, but I think if you come across this issue, you know exactly what it means, and this is going to be helpful to you. So we actually went through tip number 1 and 2. We went through the first live wire and then access data from any path using first. Now I want to go to, I use a code node after every API call. So this is what I do over here. Every time I have an AI agent step, I use a code node. Every time I have a HTTP node, like an API call, I use a code node. If I have a webhook, I use a code node. And I always do this pattern because like technically in the AI agent step, I can do require specific output and use an output parser. But what I find, which is like very often after I execute one of these API calls, not only do I want to access the data, but sometimes the data is so like it's very complex, like it's nested in very specific ways. So not only do I want to access it from a very like it's a folder within a folder within a folder, but then I want to do something, I want to transform that data and make it usable for my specific workflow. So over here, all I'm doing is just parsing the output of this AI agent step. And commonly with AI agents, you can either use the json.parse, which is like a function where you just like take the output and you have access to it. Sometimes the AI agent step will like double or triple nest your actual your workflow data. So it uses like JSON's got like a bunch of backticks. and if you use the regular JSON.parse, it will not work for something that has multiple nesting inside it. So I don't know why the AI agent step does that, but over here, we can just use a function to just parse out the output. We have type healthy and food apple. So this agent just takes the input, if it was apple, and it just parses it with whether it's healthy or unhealthy. Now, shopping list. This is interesting. So for shopping list, this is just going to a webhook in another workflow that I have. But this is something that you might be very familiar with, or you hopefully might not be familiar with if you don't have complex data. This is like a nested shopping list where you have like shopping list as the parent object. Then you have produce, snacks, and meals. And under each of these categories, you have like the items or other subcategories. So this is very nested, which makes sense why I might use a code node to actually unpack the items from here. But the other thing that I do is I actually check to see if, so not only am I pulling out the data from the HTTP node, I'm also trying to now use that data in my workflow immediately. So I use a code node to run both those functions at once. In this case, what this function does is it looks at the shopping list over here, and it looks in the edit fields node, which is over here, to see if the item exists in our shopping list. So Apple doesn't exist in our shopping list, which is surprising. Does it actually not exist? Let's see. Carrot, pear, chips, chocolate, and taco. Okay, so taco is what I had over here. I'm just going to delete this, and this is the beauty of this. I can just literally delete this thing that we added in before, and I might be like, yeah, actually, I don't want to use it anymore. So I can just re-execute, and now let me just write in taco, just hard code this into here, and apple. Let's execute this, and we have to change our function over here to be taco as well. Beautiful. Now I'm just going to bring all the data up into this point. So I'm just going to press play on this specific node, and it's going to execute to this specific node and nothing further. And now we can see that success, taco exists in that grocery shopping list. So yeah, that's a really cool way to just modify our workflow. Let me bring this back over here. And okay, let's go to our next tip. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Return the entire output of a previous node using this specific function. Okay, so this is interesting. Now, I think I might use it here pretty much straight away. So we have the item exists in the grocery list, and then we have return all. So what I find is before major transitions, so like before loop nodes or before if I need to execute a sub workflow, I will typically want to have I want to return the entire data set from a previous node, or even just in a regular workflow. You want to return the entire data set, which is this, because now I want to loop over each of these items and then run another function to see if they're healthy or unhealthy at the per item level. So if that's the case, how do I actually bring this entire object into this specific pathway? Because I didn't need to access it over here because this is just like a decision router for me. So to do that, I just use the function which I listed before. It's as simple as this: return, and then shopping list, this is the name of the node, and then .all, and I execute this, and it literally gives me the exact same object of data as what we had from this shopping list. So this works for any single node. I can take this, and I can replace this with the AI agent node, with the parse node, whatever I want, just change the name over there, and it outputs the data for me. So now I'm just going to be splitting out my data set by this shopping list, and that's going to isolate each of these separate items. So I'm going to isolate this as 1, this as 2, and then this as 3. So that's one of the other tips that I use. I also have loop the loop. I have pin the data and test. Okay, I'm just going to come back to the loop node a little bit later. What I want to look at is now pin the data and edit it to test edge cases. Okay, so before we go into this loop function over here, let's go into this if node. So this if node, we can actually one step back. Let's go into this checklist. In this checklist, I can actually pin the data, and this means that whenever I execute this workflow again, whatever was saved in this specific node, it's just going to execute it again. So typically, if I'm building a workflow and I'm testing something that has an API call that's making a change to a database or something, I would just pin the data from that specific API call, so I don't have to just keep re-hitting it, but then the rest of my workflow can run. The other cool thing is that you can come into here and I can click this edit button, and I can change this from success to fail, and I can save this, and now my pinned data is actually modified. So now when I run it through here, it's expecting to get success. If I execute this, there's no success because I actually changed this to fail. So this is a really quick and easy way to build out edge cases for your workflows without having to like get the entire data object back into your workflow and kind of make changes to it. So yeah, this is a really helpful tip as well. The next thing I want to look at is building data objects before transition. So it's very similar to using the return all before we have to go into the split node. But when you're in something like the loop node, and again, loop node or execute sub workflow or anything where like data is important for us, if I execute this loop node, I'm just going to use this do nothing node to pull through all the data. Because like if I just press play here, okay, yep, sorry about that. I'm just going to unpin this. I forgot about this. Let's unpin that as well. And if I click play, technically for the loop node, we only pass one item through at a time. So if I press this, it's going to come into here. But what we find for the loop node, we don't actually restart with the second run of data. We just run the exact same first item again and again and again. So if I want to run all three items that I've just split out, I can click this over here, and I'm going to go the first item, the second item, and the third item. But the unfortunate thing is, after my loop node does its process, which right now is very basic, which is a true and false route, if I inspect the output of data, I just have what was executed within that loop node. I don't actually have all the previous information that I created before I went into here. So let's say over here I had the entire shopping list. I actually want to take that shopping list and against each of these items write healthy or unhealthy. So now my question is like, would I normally have to just do something like this, get a merge node over here, combine both data sets against a specific variable, and then recreate my data object? Or, even easier, I can just insert an extra code node into here, and I can rebuild my data object within like this. I just pass my true item into here, and let me just get a false item as well. It's the exact same code for both of these nodes. We pass it into here. And then I use this, I always use do nothing nodes as like tidy lines to make it very simple. Like if I didn't use this, for example, this is not even like this, it's like a bit of a workflow thing that I do as well. Like this looks like it's easy to see, but once you have 1,000 lines in your workflow, it gets like a little bit confusing and it doesn't look nice. I like things that look nice as well. So I bring it into here and I can execute. So now if I just run this, if I just pull the data through here, I'm going to get each of those runs. So it was true, true, and false at the very end. And I come into the pull through node, and I can see that my data is healthy for items carrot and pear, unhealthy for items chips and chocolate, and then unhealthy for item taco. So now I actually have my data set ready in case I want to go to like execute sub workflow. This makes it super easy for me to like bring the data to the next place. Now this is interesting because instead of like having to, especially for execute sub workflows, instead of having to take all this data from this workflow, pin it into a database, and then go into your execute sub workflow and then bring all that data back, you can literally build the entire object before you go to your execute. So for that stage, I typically use a combination of like return the entire item, and then I use a combination of a code node like this, where I actually just attach the extension or that specific thing the AI agent did as one of the items that I'm returning. So for example, the header text was like healthy or unhealthy, and then the loop items were just coming from that loop over items node. So very simple stuff to just make the rest of your workflow a little bit easier. And the loop node. Okay, so what is this? So this is an example of where I use the loop node trick. Now, all it is inside the loop node, you actually have this extra setting. Let me just go back into here. You have this extra setting that you can flick on. So loop over items node, you have just one setting. You do add option, and you can do reset. So if we were to just, let's say, take this, and if I was to reroute this back into here, it doesn't actually reset with new data. It just runs the previous execution data through. So if I clicked run, it would just take the shopping list and put, the three items, healthy, healthy, unhealthy. Then it would loop through healthy, healthy, unhealthy. It doesn't bring any new data into the loop node because the loop node specifically only executes once and then it holds that data. And even if you plug in new data, it doesn't release it and then like process that new data. But you can actually reset it with the expression. And for our case in that next workflow, that expression was if the previous node was code in JavaScript 3. So this means that if my input data is coming from code in JavaScript 3, then I can reprocess that data. Now this specific use case was that I had HubSpot API and I had to extract all the separate tickets that I had in my account. I couldn't actually paginate in this HTTP node. So I could paginate within here, but there were so many pages, so many tickets that I couldn't, there was not enough memory capability within the workflow. It would just like break the node and it wouldn't stop loading, or it would just error out. So what I had to do was manually paginate through this. So my first pagination was just set over here. I extract the value for the second page. I run my actual workflow against the tickets. And then over here, I insert that value into my API again. So it's paginating against the second page. And then I extract all the details in the code node. And then I'm rerunning all the new tickets into here. So this basically ran for like, I don't know, 10 minutes for me, just going through each layer, pulling out all the pages, pulling out all the tickets. And I was able to do this where my pagination failed by just resetting my loop over items node. So yeah, that's a very nuanced hack. I ran into this problem a couple of times, not too many times, but I did use it within the last 7 days and I thought it was worth showing. So we spoke about pin and edit data, we spoke about building objects before transitions, and then finally, one thing that we've seen in a bunch of my workflows and also throughout this specific video is this do nothing helper node. So what we have over here is for key stages of my workflow, like over here, we were using it to just merge multiple lines of data into this specific node. Now, for this case, it was like, because we had 2 live wires, it wasn't really showing us the benefit of things. But sometimes my workflow, I only take one path, but I have multiple paths that I can possibly take. So I'm not actually doing like parallel execution, but I do need to merge all the nodes into one in a very clean and easy way. And I don't want to use a merge node because it's not actually needed for me. So what you do, where all these nodes actually have different names, like over here, this is switch 1, and this is switch 2. So if I actually needed to reference something over here in like an edit fields node, and then I come into here and I say like, variable, whatever it is, food or something, I can actually, like, to make an expression that says if switch 1 is available, use it. If switch 2 is available, use it. If switch is available, use it. It's actually a little bit tricky and sometimes a bit cumbersome. But if I have all these nodes going into my merge node, technically, whichever value is live, that's just passing the data through, and the merge node just passes the data through of the live node that's going into it. So in this case, I would actually get the switch variables from here, but now to reference them, I just need to reference them from my previous node, which is the merge node. So technically, I just go json.food_1, and I'm accessing whatever data is live in that current moment in time. So yeah, if you do want to merge multiple live wires together, use the actual merge node. But if you want to merge multiple paths together and just use the existing live wires data, use the merge node like this, or use the do nothing node like this. It's so convenient. So we have it used for merging multiple paths. I use it for keeping my workflows tidy. So in this case, what we saw over here, just tidy lines keeps everything tidy. And because we know it just passes through the actual JSON data that was live, it's very easy for us to work with. I also use it for denoting different routes. So when I'm actually doing workflow documentation, I will have like this function here is checking if the item exists or not. Then I will have like item does not exist or item does exist. So it's very easy for my client to come into my workflow and just visually see like, oh, this is the path for this is the path for this. I don't know why I did this, but I think you guys get the picture. And then we also had for pulling data through. So for the loop node, as you know, if you're just trying to execute this, it just takes the first data point and it runs it. But if you want to get all the data points, you can just take, which one of these is this? You can just use the pull through node and it actually just runs the entire sequence. And because it's a merge node, does nothing, you just like stopped at a checkpoint level and you can see what the data object looks like. So, which we saw was very useful because before we put these in, we actually just had some like completion data that wasn't actually useful for us. So that was my 10th tip for data handling in n8n. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching this video. If you like what you saw here, if you learned at least one tip, I would appreciate if you could like the video, drop a comment, and if you haven't already, if you can subscribe to my channel so we can reach more people and teach more people about data handling in n8n. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.